Hello, it's ukulele time. I'm Ben Eagle, Reader's Advisory Librarian and ukulele teacher. And this is the major scale, part 2. So the last video lesson I did was Introduction to the C major scale. Now it's important that you understand that before you go through this lesson. This one's a little bit more advanced. You can still get stuff out of this through watching it, but if you're going to practice videos, you really have to have the first C major exercises under your belt. So feel comfortable with the C major exercises before you start practicing these exercises. But feel free to watch this video so you know where we're going. So what you'll get out of this video is you'll learn the note names when you practice these exercises. You're going to start to learn what some of these notes are that you're playing on the ukulele, the names of them. And then you're going to learn the major scale in a couple more keys. Last time we just did the major scale in C major. You'll learn it in a couple more keys and you'll know how to build the major scale with these step numbers. Speaking of step numbers, that's the system we'll be using. So I'll teach you what the step numbers are in the major scale. That each note also has a number to go with it. It's super simple. It follows the alphabet. If you know A, B, C, D, E, F, G, it'd just be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then you'll also learn some exercises to do with your fretting hand to start building up strength in that hand and get those notes down. So to get to that information, we'll go through the numbering system, which I'll teach you, and then we'll do some examples of the C major scale and other keys with that number system. And then we'll go through some exercises that you'll be practicing on your own to start putting those things to memory. So with all that, let's get started. Okay, there's going to be a lot of visuals with this lesson, so bear with me. The main concept, though, isn't too difficult to understand. So on the screen, it's going to be the major scale in numbers. So if you know the major scale, basically all we're doing is instead of saying the notes, which you know already, if you're doing the C major scale, you'll know the note names. Instead of saying the note names, we're just going to replace them with numbers. So your C major scale, if you go through that, saying C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, you'll think of those as numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the reason why you'll be using numbers is that there's going to be different keys that you're playing in, not just the key of C major. So when you think of these as numbers, it keeps the same relationship when you're playing in other keys. So to get that concept, I'm going to go through this a little bit and look at some other examples on the screen. So first off, though, we get that each of these steps in the major scale has a number. So no matter what key you're in, you can think of those as numbers. If you remember, when I showed the C major scale in the first lesson, and if you didn't see that lesson, there's a visual on the screen here. Each part of the scale had a certain distance that we were measuring in whole steps and half steps. And this had to do with the relationship on the piano too of all the white keys. So when you do a whole step, you're skipping a black key. Half steps are notes right next to each other. On the ukulele, half steps are notes all right next to each other. And whole steps are skipping a note. So you skip one fret and play the next note. That's a whole step. Half step is right next to each other. So you can see the relationship. We had a formula. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half was the amount of steps. Now, I said it's easier just to remember where the half step is, because if the rest are wholes, you'll know that there's only 2 half steps in that. So in the C major scale, the half step is between E and F and B and C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Or to visualize it better, you can see it on one scale, since I'm skipping strings here. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So E and F and B and C were the half steps. Now let's think about this with numbers. So instead of the letters of the scale, we're thinking about it in numbers now. So if we were still doing the C scale, this is what the corresponding numbers would be. 1, 2, 3, 4, the half step between 3 and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's a whole octave. So I should say there's only 7 different notes in the scale. 8 is how we think of the octave. You could also think about it as 1 if you were continuing the scale. But let's just think about it 1 through 8 for now. So the steps are between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. 1, 2, 3, 4 is the half step right next to each other. 5, 6, and 7, 8 is the half step. Or on one string, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There it is. Okay, I'm going to drive this point home a little bit more, just so that we can get more examples here of how this relationship works. Now let's take a look at it on the piano. The last time when I introduced the C major scale, I showed what it looks like on the piano and why the piano is set up the way it is. So all the white keys on the piano make up the C major scale. When you play C to C on the piano, one C to the next C, playing only white keys, that's the C major scale on there. So you can see the diagram. I'll make some room for it here. And now let's look at the numbers of the scale. So if you're playing in numerical order 1 through 8 on the piano, each of those white keys, you're playing the C major scale. So those half steps are between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. And those are called half steps because there's no black key between them. So you're playing the note right next to it. The E and the F are right next to each other. And the B and the C are right next to each other. Between all the other notes, there's a black key. So those are whole steps because they are skipping a note. So there is a note between those keys. And we're doing a whole step. So to do that relationship on the ukulele, it's a little different because you have all half steps on here. And you don't see where those sharps and flats are, those black keys, on the ukulele. So each of those lines is like a row of the piano keys with the black keys on there. A part of the row anyway, not the whole piano row. Okay, so that's the C major scale on the piano. And we know why the half steps are where they are. But in order to do the major scale in other keys, you have to use those numbers to preserve the same relationship. Let me show you an example. So now we have the G major scale. Before we were doing C, which was all the white keys. Now if you want to keep that same relationship with the whole steps and half steps, where the half steps would be between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8, you're going to have to use a black key now. So when you're playing in other keys, you're going to have to utilize those black keys on there, those sharps and flats. So if you start on the G, 1 to 2, there's a black key between them, that's a whole step. 2 to 3, there's another whole step. Now 3 to 4, there's no black key between it. So that's still a half step. C to D, which is steps 4 to 5 is a whole step. Step 5 to 6 is a whole step. Step 6 to 7 is a whole step. Now notice it had to go to the black key because E to F is a half step. And between 6 and 7, it's still whole steps. The only half steps, again, are between steps 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. So now we're on that F sharp key, which is, it's a sharp if you have to go to a black key to the right of one. So we're to the right of F. Instead of playing regular F, we're playing F sharp now. And then you'll notice when it goes from 7 to 8, it resolves nicely back to that white key. So we still have those half steps between steps 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. So that's why when you do any other key to keep those same relationships, it has to use black keys. So I show it on the piano, so you know if you start learning the names of the scale and you're just trying to do the G major scale, if you started on G, if you were just thinking you could go through with the same notes as the C scale and go G, A, B, C, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You're not actually playing the G major scale because you have that F natural note in there. It's not the F sharp. So that's why when you're learning it on here, it's important to know those step numbers as well. Okay, one more example. The key of F is going to have a flat in it, which is another black key. So it starts on F and ends on F. The 1 is on F and the 8 is on F. That's the octave. So whole step between 1 and 2, whole step between 2 and 3, then the half step between 3 and 4. Notice that you have to go to the black key next to it to get that half step, the key right next to A. So there's that half step between 3 and 4. Then it has to do a whole step after that. So then you skip that B and go to C. And then whole step, half step. 5 to 6 is whole, 6 to 7 is whole, 7 to 8 is a half step. So in this key, F, you have a different black note. So if you go F, G, A, B, it's not just a regular B, it's going to the left of B, so it's a B flat. So if you're moving to the left, it's a flat note. If you have to move to the key to the right, it's a sharp note. So again, it doesn't use all the white keys. You have to use a black key on there. So what's all this have to do with the ukulele? Well, let's look at some examples on the ukulele neck so we can translate it to that. All right. Let's look back at that C major scale on the neck of the ukulele. So we looked at this in the C major video. We'll look at it here now, just to see the number system on here. So first, we got the notes on here. And the octave C to C is circled. Remember the lower C, the open C, is towards your head, closer to your head, and the C on the 3rd fret is the one towards your feet. So those circled C's are the octave. So each of those notes on there are all the natural notes. Think of those as the white keys on the piano. They're not sharps or flats. So when you're going through these exercises, that C major scale we did last time, it's good to memorize those notes. Then you know where all those natural notes are. Now when I say natural, that means a note that's not sharp or flat, one of the white keys. Then you'll know where those natural notes are on the ukulele neck, and you'll start to learn those note names. Now here's what it looks like with numbers instead of the notes. So a good exercise, and I'll go through them in a moment here too, is to say the numbers of the notes as you play the scale. So once you know the scale position, play the same scale and then start learning those numbers as you go through it. So you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, with the half step between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. Okay, that's the C major scale on the ukulele. Now let's see what it would look like with black keys, with other major scales. So we'll look at the same ones we looked at, the G major and the F major, both keys we played in on the ukulele in past lessons. So let's take a look at those keys on the ukulele neck. Okay, now we're looking at the G major scale on the ukulele neck. Now before I go through it, I want to point out that G is a little weird key to play in because of the way the ukulele is tuned. So this string that's closest to your head is actually higher than the string below it. This is a lower pitch. When you go from here to the first string, it goes low, higher, higher. But then this string here kind of throws that pattern off because it's higher. So when you play the G, it's starting on here to this G, they're actually the same pitch. So we're not really technically doing an octave to an octave. And when you go to the string below it, it's going to go high and then get low again. So you'll see what I mean when I play it. So it goes G, A, B, C, and then it gets low. But I want to do the exercise this way so you learn the note names and see where the half steps are. So if you look on there, there's an F sharp. That's because when I did the scale on the piano, we learned that it's not an F natural on there, it's an F sharp. Now at some point, it's good to know, just memorize the different, which keys have a sharp and flat. We're not going to do that now, but luckily you're only usually playing in a few different keys on the ukulele. So we're starting with just these three today. Knowing whether there's a sharp or flat and where it occurs is helpful when you're playing the songs, or when you're playing in that key. So, in G you have an F sharp instead of an F. So your steps are going to look different. So we have G, A, B, C on the next string, D, E, F sharp, G. And remember, the reason that sharp is there is to preserve that same amount of whole steps and half steps. So when you do the whole step, half step pattern of the major scale, the half steps are between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. So when we think about this G major scale in numbers, we can look at that on the ukulele neck. You'll see 1, 2, 3. Now I have the note in parentheses because you could just keep going up the neck, or you could go to the next string. So I have 4 here, and I also have 4 as the open string. We're just kind of doing the box positions, so we can ignore the note in parentheses for now. So you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so the half step was between 7 and 8. and 3 and 4, or 3, 4. So that G major has the F sharp in there. So the major scale is a little different than the C. Okay, we'll look at one more, the F major scale. I'll bring that up here. Need even more room for this one because you'll see the F, the F is starting on the second string. There's not an F on either of these two, the third or fourth string. So the F is starting here. So to complete the scale, you're going to have to go up the neck a little bit, which is going to be fun and some good practice here. I'll show you a way to play that when we do the exercise. So there's the notes on there. Remember, F, the key of F, had a B flat. So instead of the regular B, it's a B flat to keep that same half-step relationship. So starting on the F with the circle here, and working up, we have F, G, A, B flat, C, and then you go up the neck, D, E, F, with that half step right at the end there. In numbers, it looks like this. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, right next to each other. 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Now we're going to look at some exercises. So we went through all the different patterns to show you where those half steps are. Now it's important to have something practical so you can work on this and memorize those patterns. And once you have those patterns memorized, this is just the building block for more theory and just understanding the songs you're playing. And when a musician says, play the third note of that scale, you'll know what they're talking about. So, regardless, knowing the major scales is going to be super important for anything you're playing. And it's just going to help build up your strength in your fingers. So, if you only get playing the major scales out of this, that's great because you're doing exercises with your hand. If you're learning the note names and the numbers, you're in awesome shape learning all these new patterns. And it's just gonna help you learning any other songs moving forward. With that said, let's look at the exercises. Here we go. Okay, so with everything I went over, these are the exercises that I would be practicing. Going through these could take a while because you're memorizing things. So I would start with the C major scale and work your way through them. So stay on the C major scale for as long as it takes to memorize those. Then once you feel comfortable with that, try the G and the F. So I'll go through each of them here so you'll know what you're doing. So, the C major scale. I covered this in the first part of this lesson, or the other video, the introduction to the C major scale. But here it is again. And if it's not memorized at this point, I would work on memorizing it. I should say with the number system and knowing where the half steps are, you can build the scales and figure out their position. But at this point, I think it's important to memorize them, especially when they're in these box positions. The reason being, right off the bat, you don't know when to switch to the next string. Now, each of these is a certain distance apart. It's a fourth, a third, and then a fourth. Well, I'm not going to cover that right now. So at this stage, you're just memorizing these positions. Then memorizing them, you're going to know where to go to the next string and when to switch strings. You could build the scale going straight across the string though. So you could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. if you were just looking for those. Okay, but the exercise. So going through the exercise, you would start on the C note, closest to your head, on the 3rd string, and you would end on the C note towards your feet, on the 1st string. So that's on the 3rd fret, using your 3rd finger. So when you play these notes, I kind of said this in another exercise, use each finger, assign it to its own fret. So if you're playing a note on the 1st fret, play it with your 1st finger. If you're playing a note on the 2nd fret, play it with your 2nd finger. 3rd fret, 3rd finger. 4th fret, pinky. So, going through this, open a C, 2nd fret D, E, F, with my 1st finger, G, A, B, C. Now the right hand, you can either, at this point when you're learning it, pick it with 1 finger. Eventually, as you get comfortable going back and forth, try to alternate your pointer and your middle finger when you're playing it. So you have when you start alternating them and get comfortable doing that, then your speed just naturally increases rather than trying to do everything with 1 finger. Okay, but at this point, it's about learning the notes. So if you're comfortable doing it all with 1 finger, just do that for now. So again, you have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And then do it backwards. C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. I know going through the alphabet backwards is a little trickier, but doing it backwards is just going to help you to learn the note by itself, not in its relationship going up and down. So, the exercise is doing that. When you're practicing the scale, memorizing those positions, C, B, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, A, G, F, E, C, D, C. Once you feel comfortable with that, then go through and say the numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And notice where those half steps are. 3 and 4 is here. 7 and 8 is here. So you're not only learning the note names, you're learning their positions in the scale. Okay, so you would do that with C until you feel comfortable just doing that. You could do that for as long as you want. That can be part of your warm-up exercise going through those. Once you feel comfortable with that, once you feel like you know where all these notes are on the fretboard here, don't worry about going up here yet. You learn mostly these positions. That's where you're playing mostly and the songs you're doing. Then, once you feel comfortable with that, try it in another key. I'll also notice I have the tabs here. If the diagram is confusing, you can look at the tab below on the worksheet that goes along with this. Okay, then the G major scale. You do the same thing with that. Remember, the G is the weird one because it's not technically playing between octaves because this is higher. But going through that, you would have G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. So then you're knowing that there's an F sharp in that key of G. And then you would do it backwards. G, F sharp, E, D, C, B, A, G. And then once you have that scale memorized, then you go through and do it with the numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then backwards. Like I said, there's not a hurry learning these. spend most time learning the C, but I include these so you know if you're playing in another key that it's not going to have all the natural notes, that there's going to be a sharp or a flat in any other key. And we play in the key of G and F when we're doing other songs on the ukulele. They're pretty common keys to play in. So then you go through, you've got the G down, then you can do the key of F, which moves up the neck. So it's got a cool little thing where you get to play up higher on the neck. So, because you're starting here, because there's not an F on these two strings, unless you move up the neck. But, so we're starting on the second string, and you have F, G, A, B flat. Remember B flat. C, D, E, F. And actually when you play up here, I'll show you, you'll want to do E, F, G, A, B flat, C. Then you can move your whole hand, your first finger, to this D. The reason being is then you can get E and F with your third and fourth finger. So there's only the one movement instead of doing, you can do okay. Then you have those notes memorized, you do the same with the numbers. So the same scale with their number correlations. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then backwards. So doing them all at once might seem like a lot to do. Songs are definitely more fun to play. I mean, I think scales are fun too, but don't try to learn so many scales at once. Really, just get that C major scale down. Once you feel comfortable with that, you can start experimenting with these other two, which is still a major scale, but in other keys. So you're learning the numbers, and then once you get the number system down and know how to jump to the other ones, building the same scale in other keys, you'll just be able to come up with it without having to look up the other thing, without having to look up the actual positions of the scale. So it's just a building block for more theory to come. So that's what you would be working on. These two lessons covered the major scale for the most part. So with that, keep working on those, and we'll do more songs as we play in the future. So it's been a good ukulele time. Bye.